Marianna, alcoholic. Look at the little camera. I'm like, can't that be a little farther back? Wow, I've got nerves. "22 years ago this February, I will be crawling to a closet to get a drink, to puke it up, to drink another, to make it downstairs, to get to the vodka, to drink enough, to sober myself enough to take my children to school. I was fortunate enough to have a cop intervene when I realized at noon that very same day I was too drunk to drive, so I pulled myself over. I thought, you know what, I better go pick those kids up early from preschool. What a day. So, long story short, on that day, I pulled myself over, I passed out, EMS intervened, the police intervened, I kicked a cop, because I'm a good Irish Catholic, and found myself in jail. And people have been saying to me for some time, it's funny because September 11th happened. I'm from New Jersey originally. We had family. I had a cousin who ran to Brooklyn literally from the Twin Towers. So that's vivid to me. And then it's a complete blackout until I realized I was going to jail. And a cop said to me, "You need some help." Now, I've been hearing that for some time. Being a good alcoholic, I did go to counseling for about a year. I drank on the way to, chugged a couple down in the parking lot, told this guy everything he wanted to hear, got back in the car, said, "Thank goodness that's over," and drank a few more and went home. And yep, I went. I was given the ultimatum: check yourself in or get out of the house. And honestly, I think if it weren't for my kids, I'd be dead. There was nothing to live for. So I went to treatment. I did my 28 days in the bubble, and I came to AA begrudgingly. And over a period of 6 months, while I was dealing with legal issues, something started to happen. I sat in the back of the room. I got there late. I left early. I didn't interact with anyone, but for some reason, God had my back, because I kept showing up there. And this building is small compared to the original clubhouse in Florida I went to. It was so scary. I mean, it was miles long. And these people were so happy, and I was so scared and so sad and so desperate and so everything. And they were smiling. And I don't know what kept bringing me back, but I met a woman, and it was one of those aha moments where you're just like, I want whatever that woman has, I want it. She just had a sense of peace about her that I still to this day, when I think of Diane, my original sponsor, I want to be just like her when I grow up. And I'm not there yet, trust me. But for a little background, I grew up in a very small fishing town in New Jersey, Irish Catholic, went to Catholic school. Started drinking when I was 12, partied my way through New Jersey, exited New Jersey, and made my way to Florida and continued the party. Met my husband, had a couple of kids. On paper, even put the picket fence up to make it look right, In my heart, I knew something was wrong, and it wasn't the alcohol. I can assure you it was not the alcohol. It was everything but the alcohol. We know all the excuses. But something wasn't quite right. And when I look back now, something wasn't quite right even as a child. I didn't think quite like everyone else. I didn't feel quite like everyone else. There's always been a sense of insecurity. It didn't matter how thin, how pretty, how well I spoke, how much I tried to fit in. I never quite fit in. Now, I will say, here is the only place. Once I kind of got used to the fact that, okay, I'm an alcoholic and this is where I belong, this is the only place I can honestly say I feel safe. Now, I go to work and I go through the motions, but I get into an AA room, no matter where in the country, and even if things are a little bit different, I feel safe. That is the first time I've ever truly felt that way. And my parents, they're my parents, but I was raised by some amazing grandparents. I really had an amazing childhood. I couldn't have asked for a better one. I had a great teenage year. It was fun. There was nothing, there's some trauma, but not enough to define the course. It felt like, now that I look back, the course was already laid because I was never quite right. And then by the time I got into treatment, you didn't talk about the voices in your head to anybody. And then all of a sudden people are talking about the voices in your head, and I'm like, you got them too? I mean, I had like a full committee in there by the time I got to treatment, and half the time I wasn't even allowed to get a word in edgewise. It was just so much chaos in my head. And I was broken. I didn't care. And truly, still, I look back at my children, and they're really, they say you have to get sober for you, but for me, I wouldn't have been alive long enough to get the miracle, get the message, get the sobriety if I didn't have a motivation. And it was my children for me. I didn't love me enough to get sober. I just didn't. So I met this woman, Diane, and she was one of those walk straight through the doors, no nonsense. You are going to work the steps. Don't waste my time. Okay. So she took me through the steps, and, we hit step 4, and I kept hearing everyone that I had gone to treatment with had relapsed by this time. There was one other person that had remained sober, and he was on his 4th step, and he was talking about going back out again, and she was like, I don't want to hear this nonsense. You'll do your 4th step. We'll do it right now together. So she took me old school. We literally did my 4th and 5th step over the period of 10 hours at her house. And, there were some things that needed to be, ironed out later, but it was a woman in AA who took the time to save my life. So I hit my first year in recovery was exactly what you would expect it to be, bumps and hills and valleys. And with all of the good things that were happening in my life, I was still doing court dates. And I hadn't, everybody had their God moments, and I hadn't had one yet. And I walked into court to plead guilty to a DUI. And as I got to the doors, and normally I'm like this, I'd get in there, he'd be like, just go sit down, you're fine. And I was so calming, then my attorney looked at me and he goes, have you been drinking? I was like, no, why? He's like, because you're not shaking or anything. I'm like, God's got this. There was, at those doors, there was that, it was like a fog moving over me, but a warm, cozy, everything's okay, just take a breath. I walked in there, I pleaded guilty, and I was fine. And he was still like, you're sure you haven't been drinking? I'm like, I haven't been drinking, I swear. That was my first God moment, and it wasn't a burning bush. It was just this sense of peace that I had never felt before, and that sense of okayedness. One of my sponsees, she's coming up on her 19th next week, and she loves automatically is one of her words, okayedness. But there was a sense of okayedness that I have never felt before in my life, a sense of peace, and that was the beginning. Even with having gone through some of the steps and stuff, that was the beginning of it for me. That part where there was a sense of okay, and I went through Catholic school. I had done all the prayers, but I realized I had never prayed, if that makes sense. I memorized the words, I regurgitated the words, but I never prayed. I found prayer here. I found a career as a nurse here. One of the biggest gifts that I had ever gotten was the ability to go back to school. I was an accountant, so I can do your taxes too. So if you find yourself in the hospital and it's tax season and you're on the oncology unit at Moore Regional, just say, hey, Marianne, I'm bringing the paperwork into it. We'll work on that as well. But I had the ability to go back to school and become a nurse. And then God gifted me with getting a new grad position on an oncology unit in Florida, which I didn't know I wanted to be an oncology nurse. And it was just there was the next aha moment where I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Then time went on, and I missed my seasons terribly, and my kids had played golf at this little tiny town somewhere in the Carolinas a million years ago, and I said to my husband, what was the name of that town? I can't live in Florida another minute. It's too hot, it's too crowded, it's too expensive. I want my seasons back. He's like, what? I said, that little town somewhere in the Carolinas where the kids played golf. He's like, Pinehurst? I'm like, yeah, that's it. So we came and we flew in, we looked. I sat down in the village and had my Forrest Gump moment and went, this is it. So I told my husband I was applying for a job. I got the job the same day. I packed up my car. I drove to North Carolina by myself, rented a house. Now, keeping in mind, this is a woman that couldn't make it down the stairs without 2 beers and a Bloody Mary 20 years earlier. Put herself into a car by herself, drove herself 3 states, rented a house, took a job, all on blind faith that everything was going to be okay. So when I think about the parallels now, yes, my husband is coming, by the way. He's just trying to sell his business. I didn't just ditch him and say, peace out, You look at the parallels between what I thought had been a decent life that just involved too much drinking and where I am today. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't get paid a lot of money. I work 2 jobs. I've got my mother who drinks living with me now. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, but it is unicorns and rainbows because I wake up in the morning and I'm sober. I now have a choice. I'm not standing in front of a judge. No one is putting handcuffs on me. No one is telling me where I have to be, when I have to be there. And more importantly, there is a sense of peace in my life that no matter how much prayer I had until I got here, those prayers were empty. This is my purpose. I believe this is our purpose. Whether we are struggling to get and stay sober, whether we are struggling with our spiritual aspect of our program, we are struggling with the external things, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm great while I'm in here. The minute I get out the door, I'm like, oh God, it's the real world again, please help. All of those things I can now handle because God gave me the gift of being an alcoholic. Now, if you had asked me if I was going to feel that way 22 years ago, I would have laughed at you. It is a gift now. I finally got the blueprint to life. I don't know about the rest of you, but I really felt like I was just flying by the seat of my pants until I got here. I'm like, now I've got direction. Now I've got purpose. Now I've got guidance when I need it. Now I've got people that love me, even though they don't have to. Now I've got advice on things, on all matters of my life. I spoke with my sponsor about becoming a nurse. I spoke with my sponsor and my girlfriends about making the move. There's no more blindly, when I moved to Florida, I got in the car and I drove. Packed up my goldfish, got in the car and drove. I've got nothing there, I might as well go here, that logistical change that we make for no reason. Now I have purpose, I have meaning. If I don't wake up tomorrow, I can honestly say I did my best. I can get up there and say, God, I tried, I did my best. Prior to AA, I was just floating. So, and I think about Ellie's 6th anniversary today. What an accomplishment, we're all sober but a day. I'm no more sober than the person who put the drink down 2 hours ago. It is a gift that we all have, and our journeys are different, and it put me right here, right now, for a reason. I didn't think at all about what I was going to say this evening. I hope that it helps someone. If you're struggling with the faith part of this, it's okay. If you're struggling with the physically putting the drink part down, it's okay. We love you. Just keep coming back. The steps are here when you need them. The steps are here when you don't need them. They're part of who we are now. And I'm not going to lie, it was not easy. It may be, it's easy, but the hardest thing you'll ever do. It was a lot of hard work. I didn't just get a little wand wave over me and, oh, sober, yay. No, it was hard. It was hard work. But nothing in life that is worthwhile is easy. I think we figured that much out at this point. And this is probably the hardest thing that you will ever do with the greatest gift you will ever get. So if you're struggling, hang in there. If you're celebrating your 6th year, I can't be prouder. And it has been a privilege and an honor to speak today. So thank you very much.